welcome. Welcome. Good morning. Thank you for coming. A jack of all trades within the watch world, Jack Forster started off collecting and then took it upon himself, like a true American, to delve into the inner workings of vintage watches to fix them, since we love fixing things, be it a pocket watch or a country's political regime. Luckily, in Jack's case, he focuses on the watch sector, from moderating in the Collectors Forum, PuristPro.com, to group technical editor and editor-in-chief of Revolution Magazine US. Now he will moderate this panel as editor-in-chief of Hodinkee. Hold on to your pitchforks and torches, folks. It's none other than Edouard Meylan. Despite his common title as heir to watchmaking dynasty, he is a pioneer in his own right, blasting through traditional barriers when it comes to speaking up for traditional watchmaking as CEO of Moser. Taking names and mercilessly serving the industry Swiss in a dish best served right now, Edouard is in the loop. No pun intended. As fluid as HYT entails, Gregory Dourde had his fair share of experience in a slew of brands until he found his home in HYT as CEO. Cross-pollination is a term he has taken to heart and made tangible when HYT decided to tell time with liquid. Unfortunately, Monsieur Raffy was supposed to take part. He'll be unable to join us. He had a minor car accident. All is well, but he's in hospital under observation. I'll allow Stephen Forsey to introduce himself, as I already have done so. Perhaps he'll enjoy taking the reins.
Well, I don't think I can do as well as Dominique. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Horology Forum, second day, and myself, watchmaker, co-founder with Robert Grobel of Grobel Forsey. We're still not sure whether we're a brand or not out in this big wide world, but we follow our passion and we try and defend and continue and pass the tradition of fine watchmaking according to our vision and our own sort of pathway. So great pleasure to be here, and I think we'll throw it back to Jack.
All right.
To get things rolling.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us this morning. And I want to say before we start what a great pleasure and an honor it is to share a stage with these gentlemen. I admire everyone's work. It's a very different body of work for each company. Very, very distinctive stuff. And you know, I think the presence of these gentlemen up here kind of shows us how diverse the art of fine watchmaking has really become. So to kick things off, I suppose, you know, Stephen, you said something quite interesting just now. We're still not sure if we're a brand. And, you know, the concept of brand is something that drives a lot of the conceptualizing about how the Goliaths of this world present their watches. You know, the concept of, you know, brand identity is very, very important. I mean, how does that, and it's something that evolves, it seems to me, for you guys in a way that is different from the way it evolves in the context of a larger luxury group. And I was wondering if we could start out by sort of talking about, you know, the concept of what brand is and to what extent is establishing a brand identity important.
Is that for me?
That's for anybody.
So, yeah, well, when we talk about brands, we think of it's a sort of a label, putting a title on something. And so, you know, when you think of branded, it's more of the label than perhaps sometimes the substance of what is actually behind that, I think. And so that's why for Grobel Forsey, are we a brand? Are we a signature? You know, we actually don't really want to be categorized, I think, and that's maybe why, as independent watchmakers, it's a good description of what we want to do, along with others. because we don't fit into that mold, you know. Strangely, though, we are in Switzerland, which is a country which always from the outside seems very organized and structured, and where, you know, everything is beautifully tidy. They snip the verges, so everything is spick and span, but we don't really want to be in a compartment to be a brand in that way. But I guess with time, and you know, you build your DNA. So you've got a story, you've got a message, you've got something you want to achieve, and as you build on that, you create a certain image, and I suppose that's why we could, you know, you could put a label there of a brand.
How about you, gentlemen?
I think that for small brands with limited possibilities of communication compared to established brands that can spend a lot of money into brand awareness and brand building, the only way to build a project, as we all do, is to have an important content. And for sure, in the world where you have more than 350 Swiss watches, Swiss brands existing, so it's a market which is oversaturated with a lot of proposition. I think that the only way to survive and the only way to develop is really to be able to have a differentiation factor, and this differentiation factor has to be with a very authentic approach of a storytelling, of a technology, of a message, of a meaning. Why do we do that? And in order to be able to develop and to have a proposal for the customers that take the risk, certainly not to easily go and to buy an established brand, but certainly to discover a new brand, and smaller, from the smaller size.
Yeah.
So I think that the most of the job that we do is really to develop everything based on authenticity and the content, scientific content or philosophical, artistic content.
Yeah. I mean, none of you gentlemen do kind of you know, brand establishing activities in the conventional sense. You know, there are no you know, working with brand ambassadors in general. There's not you know, partnerships with you know, Formula One or anything like that. It's really the narrative is really about the product.
HYT used to have that, and basically since 1 year we have cut everything, all the sponsoring that we had, because it just didn't make any sense. We had the car industry, we had the sailing, we have rock stars, etc. But at the end, it was not fitting the spirit of the brand and the original project of HYT. And that's why we stepped back and we decided to, after 5 years of existence of the brand, to question ourselves, who are we? Although we are a very young brand, it's important to always rethink of the project. And this is where we said, no, the program of communication, having partnerships, nothing that all the Goliaths do because, with a lot of money, does not fit the spirit, the DNA, and the essence of the brand as we see it now and as we project in the future.
I think you said it, you know, it's about the product. My idea is we need to go beyond the product. If we are even independent brands, for me, that's everything we do is to go beyond that. And be independent of the product. Because at the end of the day, if you're an independent brand and 1 year you don't create something that is amazing, then you won't sell and you will die. So we need to go beyond that. And with our brand, what we try to do is to create a language, to create a community that contributes to this idea of being more than just a product. And it's interesting to see, looking back 5 years ago, where we were and where we are today. I meet people who would look at a product that is maybe 10 years old and feel like it's new, it's something different. They suddenly discover the fumée dye and say, oh, now I love it. But why do they love it now and they didn't love it 5 years ago? Well, I guess there's been things that we've been doing in the way we communicate, in the way we just project everything we do as people, as a brand, as products, that kind of changed the mindset and created that emotion in the attraction to the product. So again, I think it's very dangerous to be just a product, and we need to be brands, even if we're small. And it's not just it's not about ambassadors. It's about everything else.
I mean, Moser is a very interesting case because you kind of have these two parallel paths that the company's been following under your stewardship. On the one hand, there's this devotion to what are conventionally considered the virtues of fine Swiss watchmaking: quality of finish, quality of presentation, the habillage and the dial in the case. And on the other hand, you've been very, very successful at keeping conversations going about Moser by creating these sort of provocations.
But it's linked, because everything we try to do for us, and I hope it comes across, but the idea is to have a sense behind it that is linked to Swiss made, to connected watches, to craftsmanship, to creation, to all those aspects that we love that are so important for our industry. So of course we try to promote it in a maybe a little bit unconventional way or disruptive way, but we're still talking about the same thing. It's maybe we created in a way our own language, using humor, provocation, and things that are maybe not something that we too much used to in the watch industry, at least in the traditional watchmaking.
There are things about the provocations that I think, at Hodinkee, some of our readers find very interesting because, there are all sorts of, there are certain things that everybody is thinking, but that people, either on the media side or on the industry side are reluctant to say. And you've kind of come out and said a few of these things that, people think, but nobody actually wants to talk about.
Well, I don't know if it's our role to say that, but we took the liberty to do that. We consider ourselves independent. As an independent brand, it doesn't mean we just create independent products. We need to be independent in the way we think and the way we communicate. And if we always need to think, oh, are we going to upset somebody? How are people going to react? Then we don't do anything. Yeah. And so we got rid of that. And sometimes you burn yourself, but if you don't do anything,
you survived.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. But you learn from that. Yeah, and then next time you do it better.
Yeah, and it's it's important to experiment. Obviously, otherwise, if everybody is has the same communication strategy and the brand building activities are pretty much the same across the board, the conversation gets kind of dull.
Yeah, I think this notion of a brand is often vehicling, it's pushing a product. And that's quite different from our approach because we're watchmakers, we're creators, we're innovators. And so it's that credibility that why we're doing something, we're not doing it to create a product. In fact, it's often quite extreme that we don't even consider what is going to be the position for a possible position for a new timepiece.
Position in what sense?
Finished. Well, a position, how it's going to be received, or we're thinking about, we want to create something. We have an idea. We want to make that as perfect as possible, so that the collector, will enjoy it, and the watch community will enjoy it, whether they can access it or not. But they are our focus, which is quite different to the idea of saying it's the product, and then afterwards you have to sell the product. It's a.
Do you guys think? There's a brand has almost become kind of a dirty word, insofar as it can become a substitute for kind of understanding what's specific, unique, and interesting about the actual watch and about the creative process that goes on at each of your different companies. And one of the reasons that I sort of framed the question the way that I did is because it seems to me from the outside looking in, as a media person, that the attraction, I think, for a lot of people, potentially for all of your products, is that they don't come from, kind of what we consider a standard, consumer relationship with a brand. There's a different kind of identification that goes on with the product. Does that seem like a viable thesis?
Yeah, I would say that beyond the product and the technology, you always have to have a whole story to tell. And for example, at HYT, for sure we have spent a lot of money and time in order to develop a completely new technology. And this new technology has been inspired by the aerospace industry, medical device, semiconductor, etc. And we had to merge all these new ways of producing and proposing a system to the customer. But this new science and these new technologies that have been developed are just nothing and cold if you do not have a meaning and a proposition to give to the customers, which is not selling the technology. I was discussing this morning the analogy. I was happy and proud, but between HYT and Tesla. Somebody say, I use a Tesla.
Like maybe lately that's not such a great comparison to draw.
But
I mean, is the next thing going to happen? You're going to be on a podcast someplace.
Yeah. What I liked in the parallel is that Tesla, for sure, has a very intense and incredible scientific and technological project.
Yeah, for sure.
But Tesla doesn't sell the technology. It needs it in order to propose a value proposition, which is new ways of leaving the transportation from point A to point B.
Yeah, and in a larger sense, that they're selling the vision of an idealistic future.
Exactly. And for what we did is that we used the technology in order to give a new perspective, to offer a new perspective, a new vision on how you live the time, which is less abstract, which is more in the flow, in the flow of the time, with analogy with the liquids, having the time and space regrouped together with inside this visibility of the gauge of the liquids moving. And we propose that, and I think that this is all the work that we do and the way we build a brand at this level has to have a very important consistency in order to be relevant and to exist when you have a very limited amount, to communicate and to exist. This consistency.
Yeah. I mean, this particular panel is framed as David and Goliath, and
Hello.
And one of the things I'm curious about is that how it feels to you? I mean, does it feel like you're smaller and you're pitted against these sort of clumsy behemoths, and you have to be very clever and very much clever and much more strategic in order to survive?
Well, you have to be really credible and authentic, and it's certainly very difficult to appear as when you start as an independent watchmaker. Usually, you've got your first watch, and that's it. You don't have 150 or 200 years of history where you can pull out and talk about the DNA and the history and what was created then and all
but
I mean, baggage.
They're both independent and larger brands, that try to do that. So you take the name of a watchmaker who passed away in 1785.
Yeah, it's a different way, but when you sign something yourself, you're saying something, and if you're prepared to go out there and talk about it as well, that's a particular choice. It doesn't fit everybody. Obviously, it would be perhaps difficult for HYT. What they've done is very disruptive and very, very interesting. But certainly we share all of that, all of us. I think that approach also with Moser, that we want to go out there and we've got a vision which is different to the big standard model of the watch industry. And so our story is different. It's today we want to do something our own way. We have our own vision. That's why we started. That's why we took these challenges on. But of course, fortunately, we had no idea how hard it would be, because otherwise we'd never have started. It's you're going out there and you're playing in the courtyard of the big guys, and they can just walk past and step on you, and that's it. It's but I don't say that they do, but that weight and that energy and that power, that presence which is built up, is a huge challenge to come up against. Yeah. So we have to be creative. What we do often, we don't do it necessarily consciously. It's not strategy to say we're going to do it like this because we can talk about that. You know, so hard to create each piece that when you get to the stage where it's nearly finished, there it is. But nobody's going to understand it if we can't talk about why and the different things. So there we have to interrogate ourselves and then say, okay, well, this was a particular challenge. This would be interesting. We want to talk about these techniques we've used, which are not used in the industry. But and then you're into this land of a sort of a bit of fog, which is quite difficult to negotiate, where you've done something by hand, but everybody else does it by hand. But we have a team of over 100 people to make just over 100 watches a year. Certain very established companies make 50,000 watches with 1,200 people, but everything's made by hand. So there are things which we also have to try and, with the support of media, and try and educate people to understand. And you know that what we do is credible, and people want to see, and they want to understand, and they want to know why and how, and that can be an advantage because we've got so much that we can roll out as the questions come on.
I just wanted to react. You said, we cannot play this card of the really old brand. Well, in our case, this year we're 190 years. We're not making a big fuss out of it because I don't think it makes sense. But at the same time, I think we can communicate about our history. We just need to do it differently. If I make a 15 minutes movie about Moser and the history, who's going to watch it? And I think even the big brands realize now you need to communicate in a different way, and that's our opportunity. We can, as manufacturers with history, even if it's 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 190 years, or whatever, you can talk about it. You need to do it differently in a way that it creates that emotion, creates a community who reacts to it. Yeah. And I don't feel in any way that we should, kind of apologize for being there compared to those big brands. On the contrary, we're there to make things move, and I think we can.
So you raise an interesting point. One of the ways in which a smaller brand can kind of wage asymmetrical warfare in the marketplace against the big boys is through the use of unconventional means of communication. The internet has been instrumental in building brand identity for a lot of small independent brands. That's where a lot of the smaller brands have really developed a strong following. I mean, I remember the first time that I met Stephen was at a dinner organized by what was then the Purists.com and what is now Purists Pro back in, it was a long time, 2006, I think?
Yeah, I think so.
And the reason, the whole reason that I was able to do that and that we had, contact with that brand in the United States was, it was still early days for the watch internet, but it was there. But now, and to your point, we're in a situation where the bigger brands are finally kind of waking up and realizing that there are alternative, possibilities for communication, alternative possibilities for marketing. I guess the question is Goliath starting to steal ideas from David?
I think so, yeah. Unfortunately, we see the last few years when you look at the big brands, the way they're starting to grasp. Maybe it's also a change in generation of top management, especially in certain groups. And yeah, they start to think differently. They grasp the digital revolution. They're more attuned with their current and future consumers, and we see that change. Social media in a few years, you didn't have to be very smart to be present and leverage that very well.
Right.
In the meantime, it's much more difficult now. So we need to be on the next thing, and there's tons of things changing. So there's always opportunities in the way you can communicate and touch your potential customers or just people you want to build the brand awareness through. But I feel like we had a few good years, and I wonder how that's going to evolve.
A few good years where a smaller brand could really dominate the conversation in certain channels.
Yeah, but there's going to be other. I mean, there's always new technology. There's always new things. I mean, I talk with my team about things. I mean, we have young guys of 25, 30 years old who come up with technology I've never heard of. and I'm not that old, I think, in this industry, but I'm like, wow, I need to learn from those young people and all those other industries where they're far ahead of us. And I think we were, in a way, the independent brands a little bit ahead of quite a lot of brands, not all of them. I think brands like, APE, Richard Mille, they've been quite ahead there and probably leveraging that now in the last few years with the strong growth. But I think a lot of brands are catching up, so we need to stay ahead.
And one gets the impression as a journalist in this space that there were, over the last couple of years, there were a lot of high-level meetings with major brands where people sit around, asking questions like, what are these hashtags I keep hearing? But I think it's true. There's a way in which any media space can be taken over by any organization with large enough resources.
But I will not forcefully oppose David versus Goliath. I think that we have the chance of having a watchmaking ecosystem. It's like a living body. And inside this living body, you have big cells, small cells, etc. And I think that what the danger would be that this whole ecosystem moves into a business model as you have in the car industry. It's a danger, but I think that because in the car industry now you have 10, 15 different brands, that's it.
Right.
As of today, you know that the 10 most important brands in the world, they do 80 or 90 or maybe more than 90% of the revenue. But we have the chance and the opportunity, first of all, to have some space to propose and to live together, although it's always a fight, for sure. But I think we bringing new ideas to life allows this ecosystem to grow. Mm-hmm. And I think what is interesting is when you merge and you take the best of both. And you take, for example, what did the SHH experience with the Carré des Horlogers. Mm-hmm. I think that the Carré des Horlogers brought a new dynamic and very interesting proposition inside the SHH, and us as a part of the Carré des Horlogers, we benefit from the Goliath. And I think that very few examples of cross-contamination, positive cross-contamination has been done. And this way, for me, has to be developed and to be explored. And but for sure, for that, you and us as the small brands, we have propositions to do to the Goliath. Goliaths together, they will fight for sure. But us, I think that, and then being grouped, having the possibilities to exchange, to talk, to have a common project to bring to the press, to the trade, to everybody, to the customers. I think this is new ways also that we have to change, to transform, at least to be open to explore these new ways.
I mean, that's I think there's a tendency among consumers to sort of think of luxury watchmaking as a sort of a zero-sum game where everybody is out to make sure that they win and nobody else does. And where success is always at the expense of somebody else. But you're proposing something a little bit different here. You're talking about kind of a not only peaceful coexistence, but actually a cross-pollination of ideas between the smaller independent brands and the larger. Yeah.
Well, it's something that as an independent, you realize you have to do, because you're entering a community, the watch community, with collectors, with the buyers. And you want to interest them in what you do. But what you realize is that your collector who is going to choose your watch today, probably next year he will choose a different band, or, you can't expect to take him prisoner. And this can be the mistake with a little bit with the big brands. It's been focusing too much on product. You're trying to take your customer prisoner and make sure they only ever buy your product. You know, we see this in the wider world, and and it's something which today we react against because we want more authenticity, and you know, it's things when we look for what we eat, we look differently. We're looking for source produce. We want to know where it comes from. We want the, you know, we're looking for more authenticity, and so this notion, it's a community, and you know, to come together and have a platform where each one can talk about their own thing, can coexist, because one of the wonderful things about watchmaking is there are many different ways to do it. You know, we are three very different representatives, three different creations, products, watches, you know, and that's the thing, and there are many more. So it's something which today for the collector, for the watch enthusiast, it's very exciting because you can go so much further than you could 20 years ago. And 20 years ago sounds like a long time, but then Vianney Halter was one of the first, and Uwe with a disruptive modern approach to watchmaking, which started to break this perception that a watch was a case, a movement, and a dial, and you could change the dial and the case and the hands, and that was it. No.
I mean, there's a sense in which, you know, that's an interesting point you've made. There's a sense in which none of you guys are running companies that have competition in the ordinary sense of the word. You know, if you were making stainless steel sports watches on bracelets, selling in the $5,000 to $11,000 range, then we could talk about competition, because there are obviously a lot of very similar value propositions there. But you know, like the client for Moser is looking for a Moser watch. The client for HYT is looking for an HYT watch. The client for Grubel Forsey is looking for, you know, something from Grubel Forsey and not something from somebody else. Do you think that? And again, that's kind of how it looks from the outside looking in. So I'm posing that as a question to you guys. Is that how it feels to you?
I would moderate that, because what our main challenge is to have the possibility to talk and to educate the people about our brand. And as we have a very limited possibilities of exposure, although we're digital native, etc., we have these possibilities, but HYT customers, except the collectors and the watch fans that are aware of HYT project and the technology, etc., and the meaning, the science, etc., I would say that the development that we did in the last 18 months is to capture other audience, other customers. Mm-hmm. And to do that, the only way is to have the best sales ambassador in the world, in all the doors, the boutique, the retail that we have, is to have the possibility to educate. So, because when the majority, 99.999, do not know HYT, but when we have the possibility to tell the story, to show the product, then the transformation, because we have some authenticity, consistency, content, etc., the transformation can be easier. But to do that, you have to have the right people worldwide that can express our ecosystem, our brand, our message, technology, the philosophy. And this is our, for us, this is the #1 mission that we have, is educate sales team, educate journalists. We invite the people, we show, and for us this is absolutely key. So I would not say that HYT customers come for HYT. We have such an important work to do to train and to educate, and to propose.
No, I go totally in that sense. I think there's a core group of collectors who, yes, know very well what they want. But then, I mean, in our case, you know, we do maybe a bit more than 1,500 watches, so it's not everybody by far. And we have many cases where you go in a store in, I don't know, in Lucerne, where you have a customer who comes who maybe knows Rolex, but maybe not even, and then ends up having 3 or 4 different elegant, hand-wound watch from 4 different brands, and one of them is Moser. So as you said, there's fierce competition, and those 4 other brands, well, they want us out because you always hit on the smaller one, and and that's where we need to be strong. That's where we need the best salespeople, educated, who know the brand, who we talk to every second day. We go in the stores, like all the big other brands do. So you need to build even more relationship. You need to offer something special to stand out on that tray.
Yeah, I mean, enthusiasts are obviously very vocal, and I mean, for the last 20 years, as the watch internet has evolved, it's become possible for a relatively small group of people to have a fairly big soapbox when it comes to kind of feeding back to the industry and praising it or criticizing its practices. But the concept of reaching, that's the sort of need to reach a new audience. That's something that exists for all of you guys.
It depends who you want to be. If you want to, I mean, there's 2 strategies. You can stay small and say, I want to do 40, 50, 80 watches. Right. Well, I want to do much more than that. Right. I mean, we do 1,500. I think my objective is 3,000, for example. How do I get there? It's not with those kind of people. Right. If I only listen to that people, then I'm not going to go beyond that. Yeah. So you need to kind of keep that audience, listen to them, but not only. I mean, otherwise you're gonna stick in your thing. I think it's about creating things differently, creating the need towards other people, reaching out to other people with something different. I think yesterday we had great discussions about creativity and being creators and in a way not listening always to the consumer, but creating something maybe they don't really expect and go further than that. And I mean, for me, it's really important to go beyond this core group who kind of we all fighting for the same kind of
I mean the truth is you can kind of go broke making watches just for watch enthusiasts.
Yeah. And then again, 1 year you don't do the right product that they like, and you're dead. Yeah. So you need constantly to be extremely creative, which costs you a lot of money in R&D to have the new crazy things the next year, and that's tough. I mean, really tough.
One of the interesting.
That's why it's important to be a brand.
Yeah. No, I take your point. I mean, one of the interesting things about the watch industry now is, I mean, there were always annual fairs, but there seems to me to be so much more pressure than there used to be to have something absolutely amazing, new and different every single year. Otherwise, you kind of like fall to the bottom of the conversation. And the trade show, structure has kind of exacerbated that problem. We all go, to SIHH and Basel World, at least for now. And, everybody publishes, 150 stories within the first, 3 or 4 days of the show opening. It's hard to kind of stay on top, to kind of float to the top when there's that much, news going out there. The 1 year product development cycle for watches, to your point, it's very expensive, and it puts a lot of pressure on all of the brands.
Well, you need to be smart. If you go to SIHH and say, I'm gonna put like the big commercial piece, well, you're most likely gonna be one of many, and it's gonna lose sight. I think it's probably better to plan it later. Our strategy is to always come with something that is more of a piece of art, something controversial sometimes, because of course it brings visibility in the media, but at the same time, it's not our big commercial thing. Then we have those things along the year that are planned, that are on a regular basis coming out. But you need to think in a way of how to stand out with a lot of people, some much more influential than us. And it's very complicated, but at the same time, I think we need to be there. We need to get out there. And
I think we've seen a huge evolution. I mean, we hear these days, and with the additions of Dubai Watch Week, a very exciting initiative. Huh? We already spoke about that. In the past, the watch fairs it was a trade show, B2B, really. To the retailer, and the interest from the press has come with the creativity, but with the interest from the public, and has grown. And the more the media becomes specialized, and the more that's communicated, the education, the level, the expectations of the final client have risen hugely. I mean, For us, when we launched in 2004 with one caliber, which was our only watch, the only piece we had for the first 3 years while we developed the next one, the average age of our collector there would have been in the age around 60s. What's interesting is now we're coming close to our 15th year, and we would say the average age is probably 40s. So not only have you got, after 15 years, a drop, but you've also got a generation drop where we can see a renewal of interest, and we can see new collectors coming on board, and quite often with very high expectations. You know, there's a lot more knowledge available thanks to internet, and certainly it's been a key tool in being able, you know, in helping the independent watchmaker to get the story out there and to be able to talk about what makes it different, what is special, and why we do it. So.
Yeah, completely right. And I think that where we are today and yesterday, what is during the Dubai Watch Week is, I think it's amazing, and it's really great because if you have a transformation of the trade show only for commercial purpose, then I think that the content of and the exposure and the possibilities to exchange and to communicate, to educate, etc., to have that kind of panels and open discussion, offers to the whole watchmaking ecosystem a very positive impact, because if we transform all these possibilities only to focus on trade, yes, we will be transformed into des animaux de foire. I don't know how to say it, but you know, in zoo, and the more you will try to go, the more you will try to have an incredible thing with light, etc. The key, especially what we see now, we sell quite a lot to new generation, although the price is quite high. But the way new generations are buying, they expect, and I think this is the same for all the agents of today, they expect a content, an authenticity, a debate, and all that builds the credibility of a whole industry. And as of today, we can consider, I see the Swiss watchmaking industry as a whole, which can be attacked, which is attacked, you know, by newcomers that are not that small, that can take really big market shares. And I think that it's the whole culture of our environment and the proposition that we have with the Swiss watchmaking industry, which is absolutely unique, that we also have to think to develop and to defend. And for that, we need the strengths of everybody. And that's why that kind of experience and the organization of that Dubai Watch Week, in Dubai, in London, etc., are really, I see it personally from my side, I see it very as a positive way, not only for the brand, but as a facilitator and as a potential, you know, to better explain to the whole customers what is the Swiss watchmaking industry.
Yeah. I mean, the Swiss watchmaking industry, you know, it's you use the word unique, and it really is. Switzerland is obviously not the only place the watches are made, but the way that the industry has kind of evolved over the last couple of hundred years, I think really makes the Swiss-made watch, whether it's from an independent brand or from, you know, a group-owned brand, you know, kind of a unique product. The industrial base has to be there, otherwise nobody's in business.
Yeah, and we need, and that's why I think that there is a very important equilibrium and the cohabitation between the David and the Goliath, because we need the volumes. We need the industry needs, in order to reach a very high level of quality, repetition, etc. We need, if we transform all the brands into niche brands, small quantities, only luxury, etc., I think that we will have more and more difficulties. And so there is this debate about the Swiss made. I think that we have to keep our doors open to be able to propose also the new technology. Because if we close Switzerland, a treaty project would not have been possible without NASA suppliers from aerospace industry.
Right, right.
A medical device from the West Coast.
Right.
And all the key components outside the mechanical movement. The key components of that come from outside. And I think that there is this Swiss label, which is key because it has to be not usurpated by sourcing, low-cost sourcing. Right. But there is danger in closing everything, because otherwise it's like everything, you shrink. And it's also important to see the future, and by having inspiration from other science, other technologies. And everything is not, unfortunately, but this is the fact, everything is not well managed, not well managed, well known in Switzerland.
Right.
So that's why we are, from our side, we are really open to everywhere in the world in order to get and to catch and then the proposition that we do is a Swiss-made watch, for sure.
It's a Swiss-made watch. I think there's an argument to be made that each one of you produces a luxury product. And I guess, you know, as we get towards the end of this discussion, there are two kind of linked questions that I want to pose to all of you gentlemen. Do you think of yourselves as creators of luxury products? And what does that mean? What is, I mean, do you have a sort of philosophy of what constitutes luxury and what its larger role might be?
I was going to ask you what your definition of a luxury product is, actually.
What my definition is?
Yeah.
I mean, oh boy. I actually have been... Back to you. I mean, for myself, yeah, I have I mean, I have not so much a definition as an observation. I think a lot of different things are called luxury nowadays. I mean, in a traditional sense, as we all know, luxury meant, you know, it costs as much as it costs and it takes as long as it takes. And it's relatively rare because of, you know, inherent rarity of materials or inherent difficulty of craft, and, you know, often both. But there are ways in which, and you know, I'm reading a book now, it's a history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, and the author makes a really interesting observation very early on. He talks about how in the sort of the most enlightened phase of the empire in its early, in Imperial Rome's early days, one of the ways in which the very wealthy kind of gave capital back to society was through the support of the creation of luxury objects. You know, and so if you're supporting craftsmen who make luxury objects, you're also supporting the people who support the craftsmen, the industries that make you know, these materials possible. You know, you see somebody buying a watch that costs, you know, $50,000 to, you know, $650,000, and it's easy to, you know, it's easy to kind of object to that from a sociological standpoint. You know, I mean, like nowadays especially, you sort of, from a social justice standpoint, you can look at luxury and say to yourself, my gosh, why does this deserve to exist? Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah.
So this is the question.
Yeah. Was it Coco Chanel said that luxury begins where necessity ends.
Right.
But as you say, I think when luxury has a sort of a bad connotation when it's taken in abstraction. So you look at just a picture of something and you've got a number there, which is a sticker price, and there's no comprehension, there's no possibility to explain what's behind it. And that's where you say
yes, and I think that's what's missing from so much of the sort of storytelling about Swiss watchmaking. I mean, it's a fascinating country. Mm-hmm. The industry is a fascinating industry. You know, I've met a surprising number of people who work in the Swiss watch industry who take a lot of pride in what they do, and a lot of that doesn't seem to get across to consumers. You know, you see these things kind of existing in isolation, you know, as you say, kind of an abstraction, you know, a pretty object with a very, very big price tag. Yep. But you don't see, but there seems to almost have been a concerted effort not to expose the parts of the industry that actually make buying a Swiss watch industry. Well, interesting.
Yeah, because, you know, there's also, over the years, there's been different approaches to that. And sometimes the added value is less, how can we say, substantial than it might be. Yeah. You know, but it's something we see across the whole area of luxury. You know, you look at a bag which is made, a handbag, or which is made, which is hand stitched, etc., which is made in Europe. Of course, it's an exponentially more expensive, costly to make object than if that's hand stitched in Asia, where the cost of living is so much cheaper. And that's perhaps where you get this, and this sort of often goes across to the watch industry, where where it can be assumed from this photo and the sticker price that this is machine made and assembled, and it takes a week to make, but it has a huge price tag of 100,000 or whatever. And this is the sort of where there's still a problem of education and understanding out there, and yet. So it's why we have to explain what we do and why it's costly, and we open our doors and we're transparent, because we can say, yeah, this is where we do it. We do this machining the rough parts here. We do the hand finishing in a dedicated workshop with people where it takes them years of training and expertise. And this was something we wanted to specifically for our mission, and that constrains the number of watches we make, quite simply. So it's not a question of us looking at a commercial approach to say next year we're going to make from 100 to 120 to 150 to 200 in 5 years up to 1,000. We can't do that because of the particular message and the particular story that we decided consciously and is our vision to do. But it's something which coexists very nicely with other brands, and that's where even Goliath, in a way, they need us, and probably the SIHH opened the Carré des Horologies because they needed to also be more transparent and be more open and say, well, we have there were the major brands and the big players, but to open a space to the independents, because the collectors start to come, it ceased to be a B2B, and became more B2C as well, and that collectors want more experience, and so better to be joined together and to try and make that work.
Edouard, you had something you wanted to?
Well, I wanted to continue in that direction, saying that I think there's a lot of brands that believe that price makes luxury, and actually that's completely wrong, and I think that's a big opportunity for us. If we look back at the origin historically of luxury, and especially in watchmaking, you would have those small watchmakers in Geneva, in Paris, in London, creating amazing products. People would travel the world to go and see them and order a watch, wait maybe for 2 years, and then come back and collect it. And today we see luxury brands who produce nothing and start from nowhere and mark up, do a lot of marketing, and then can sell globally. And for me, that's the opposite of true luxury, which is about the people and what you said about scarcity. And I think that's our great opportunity, is to go back to the essence of what is true luxury, and where maybe Goliath is driven by finance and about creating a lot of products and filling in the market, and eventually there's a crisis, or we need to buy it back because the prices are going down, so we need to protect that. Well, that's our opportunity, because we control that, and we can have that in our size, the connection, this human touch that all the big brands have lost in a way.
I mean, just getting it back to the whole sort of David and Goliath parallel. I mean, one thing that a brand that's part of a large publicly traded company, you guys have pressures that those guys don't have, but they have pressures that you don't have. So if you're worried about the value of the stock every quarter, there's a constant pressure to, how do you keep growing the business? How do you keep growing revenues? How do you keep your shareholders happy? You have to keep reducing costs, and you have to keep increasing sales. So we get into a situation, and again, this is, just an
that's
observation.
Our opportunity.
Yeah, but you get into a situation where the quality gradually sinks to the minimum level consistent with being able to sell the product at all, and the cost goes up to the maximum that the market will tolerate. So you start to see a value-price disparity arise in the context. It's a potential problem for larger brands.
Yeah, not only watch brands, but
But for sure, we have so much pressure on our inventory, stock, cost, sales, etc. As everybody. But what we see that I think there is also a transformation of having more and more now in a digital age access to information. I think that in the future there are some there will be more and more, you know, this discrepancy between the value and
the price.
Current, yeah. Which maybe will spread, and this information will maybe hurt. That can be corrected by mass marketing investment. But what we see at our level is a transformation from only buying a luxury product into buying an experience. This is the difference between the verb to have and to be. And I think in that sense, I come back to the content that you bring, and when you have the opportunity to communicate that, it makes your product, which is constituted by very important work, technology, meaning, etc. It gives all this possibility to express that, and for the people to readdress what is considered as a luxury product, which is not only luxury product. This is the storytelling behind that. He received it. He lives an experience. He lives with the watch. What is the most luxurious thing is the time that we spend. And if we have the right memory to keep in our head, this is the best luxury product that we can have.
Yeah, and to your point, I think that's why we've seen such a huge explosion of interest in vintage watch collecting. You know, people are not, you know, necessarily attracted to a vintage watch because it's, you know, been preserved in fantastic mechanical condition or fantastic cosmetic condition. In fact, a lot of collectors gravitate towards things that show, you know, significant signs of use in the real world and wear and tear. And, you know, they're buying the story. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I thought we can now open things up to the audience a little bit. We have time for some questions, comments, thoughts from you guys. Yes, sir.
Hi, Jack. We've talked a lot about Swiss made, and Gregory talked about sourcing the stuff from all over.
Oh, sorry, microphone.
And again. You talked a lot about Swiss made, and Gregory talked about sourcing stuff from the West Coast and elsewhere. And last year, the regulations on what is Swiss made changed from 50% to 60%. Do you think that was equitable? Would you rather see a higher percentage? And would any of you care to disclose what percentage of your stuff is Swiss made?
Who's first on the fire?
Now, I think that the debate on the Swiss made was absolutely a necessity. And what is tricky to have a regulation and a norm and a number is you bring and you put on the same basket a brand that sells product at 150 Swiss franc, dollars, retail price, having a Swiss made label, and you incorporate also global Forsey. Okay, and HOT and Mother. And what I said is that there is a danger in targeting, you know, the 100% or 80 or whatever the percentage, because for some brands that keep the philosophy, and philosophy is not a norm, and that doesn't have a number, but the philosophy of the Swiss-made watches, with the production in Switzerland for the assembly, etc. Where we have to be very cautious is not to lose our creativity and possibility to develop new objects for the future. And I think that as of today, we are in a transformation, radical transformation, and people say we are in the new enlightenment with the artificial intelligence, etc. And I think that we cannot foresee the future based on what happened in the past, and less. So it's always a new creation, and in that dynamism, I think this is really our responsibility not to shrink and to close ourselves and to limit. And part of the limitation is absolutely necessary in order to make the difference between a watch where you have almost all the components that are sourced in China or low-cost countries with a label of Swiss made, which is something which is not, which hurts the whole Swiss watchmaking ecosystem environment. So this has to be solved, but to be careful not to go too much in the other way, where you will lose, especially for us, you will lose some opportunities to propose a new product, new technology, new proposition to the customers.
So the interesting thing is that the Swiss made, the 50% to 60%, also had another difference. And that's that now you can include your R&D cost in that Swiss made label. So actually, if we're really honest about it, it's probably worse than it was before. For us, we are, across our collection, probably 80% made in-house. And we're very closely following. We don't always, of course, raw material cannot always come from Switzerland. Sources of platinum and gold and various other metals are relatively scarce, even in the mountains. There's plenty of cheese, but that's not always. No.
Lactose intolerant.
So we are very keen, and but it's interesting actually what Gregory says, because there he's talking about technologies which probably don't exist in Switzerland and are only available in very, very particular circumstances and situations. So that's an interesting, very valid point about that. I think again it's about being honest, and today, as we've seen over the years, I don't need to draw any examples, but if you make the mistake of using parts or a caliber from another country, you better be careful because somebody's going to spot it. So
in less than 24 hours usually.
Yeah, without mentioning anything, so that honesty and that consistency, as I mentioned, we open our workshop to visitors, to media. We encourage them to come. They can photograph. We don't have any secrets. What we're trying to do is we're trying to say that there is know-how and there are skills which we risk to lose. They are very costly to train. They're costly to support and to try and transmit to future generations. And this is our particular mission. And others have different, and they're very active as well. They're also doing that. But this is our own particular mission. And so sometimes we're not even sure if we really need to or want to put Swiss made as such, because it doesn't necessarily. It's not a USP. It's not a unique selling point for our particular work.
Edouard?
Well, I completely agree. I think Swiss made in our segment doesn't make much sense. For me, it's a way to compare, and for certain brands to get the credibility. We don't believe in that, but that's our point. I think it's good that Swiss made is evolving, that there's a discussion around it. Mm-hmm. I think we were quite vocal about it. I think the most important thing is what you said, honesty and transparency. I think we need to aim towards more of a certificate of origin and stuff like that, in saying we do everything from the movement perspective in-house, but we source in Switzerland the case, the dials, some straps we have to source outside Switzerland, because in Switzerland you're not allowed to take care of the skins, but all the rest is 100% made in Switzerland. That's the way we want to promote. We make a certificate with our watches. We don't have the Swiss made anymore, and I think some brands will need it. These are not the brands we want to be compared with, and I think the most important thing is really to promote this transparency across brands, so that we don't cheat the customer. Because the biggest problem I think with the Swiss made is that we were kind of happy in the Swiss watch industry that a lot of customers, and not just the novices. I was really surprised last year how many experts, collectors came to me and said, "Oh, really? That's what the Swiss made is all about. I thought it meant that it's 100% made in Switzerland." And I was like, wow, you have 100 watches and you still believe that? But we were, I think, in the Swiss industry, we were really happy that people believe that. And on the contrary, please don't talk about it, because we would be afraid that other people would notice the reality of the Swiss made. And also because statistics show that for similar products, the Swiss made label gives you a premium of 20%. Obviously, the entire Swiss industry, and not only the watch industry, is benefiting from it. So the Swiss are very, happy to keep it under the radar in a way. Keep it silent.
The reality is in Switzerland, it's very costly too. There are minimum salaries, there are conditions which are complex, a geography which is complex. Cost of living is very high. And,
and the key is the education.
Yeah.
And this is, you were talking about honesty, how to be honest and to have the possibility to express that and to communicate that. And I think that kind of panel, that kind of discussion that has been initiated is here. And in order to be able then to educate and to talk about that. And at the end, I think that the best way to be sustainable over the year is really to have this authenticity and consistency. Yeah. But we need education. So we need you, we need all of that organization. Thank you, Dubai Watch Week. We need that in order to evolve and to put the strategic points, strategic reflection, etc., on the press, trade, and then final customer.
I think there's maybe one thing just to add that in our case, because what we do is we are very particular. Our expectations are high, and the expectations of the collector, who is going to invest, who's going to pay a high amount of money for one of our creations. It's important for us to have a proximity. So in fact, not only do we aim for 100% Swiss made, we're actually pretty much within a radius of 50 kilometers of our workshop for almost everything because of that proximity. If we have our dials made in the other side of Switzerland and we have to go and check, you lose one day to do that. And probably, you lose that synergy. So the synergy, the connection, when you come to these artisan skills, which are very costly, it involves quite often a lot of special techniques or techniques we have to relearn. All of these things together mean that it's about people and it's about communicating and trying to get the message across and to try to avoid that a specialist finishes something for them, but they know it's not to your quality, but they're hoping that you're going to accept it anyway. This is always a very delicate discussion which can happen because it's not usually very happy. Over the years has driven us to realize we have to actually ourselves invest in-house all the time. We have at least one capital investment project to acquire a new skill. So today we can make in our quantities our own balance springs and balance wheels as well. It's something because there are several reasons. We wanted to learn how to do that because it's kind of a black box, and so we wanted to unravel that and understand it. But it's also to make sure that if we are stuck from the specialist outside for something that's key to our to respecting and sticking to our path, that we can react and respond to that. So this is more, I think, the reason for, when you get to this sort of level of complications of independent watchmakers, that creative desire and spirit and vision means that you're not prepared to accept something which is a standard. It's got to be good. It's got to be better than good quite often. And so that proximity, that interaction, and the people are so valuable there and so important.
I think quality is an extremely important element because I see in our price segment, which is a little bit lower than yours, we start to be compared with the Goliath, and if we don't do better and higher quality, Swiss made, in-house made, then somebody will take two watches next to each other. One will be 6,000, ours is 11,900, And they would say, well, if it's the same quality, why would I pay double? So that forces us to be even better.
You have to be better.
Yeah. And if one day in China they can do as good as us, then I totally understand why the customer will go for the cheaper version. So I think that's good because it pushes us to go even better and find new ways to try to reach perfection, even though we will never reach it. Maybe Gerber can reach perfection.
Oh, it's out there.
Anyone else? Another question? Yes, in the back.
Anyone on the panel can answer this one. What do you think the independent brands are doing that the big brands can learn from?
Everything that we do.
The proximity, again, for us, our case is particular. 100 collectors a year, 100 timepieces. We can meet everybody. We can meet 100% of our customers in a year. If you have a big volume industrial brand, it's just not possible. So we get a very, very unique feedback from the collector, from the client. And that's something which is really difficult for a big brand because you're an industrial setup. It's such a different story. So these things, again, like Edouard said, that the quality has to be better. We have to be better. We have to push further. We have to offer more. We have to be more engaging, more entertaining, more professional in our specifics that we do, and we have to push.
And the ability
there's very little room for maneuver in there.
The ability to have a relationship with your clients is it's really critical, isn't it?
It's very humbling, because because there are so many beautiful watches and there are so many fantastic brands and everything out there, and if they want to spend time with you, with us, with with an independent, and they want to know the story, they want to understand, they're giving their time, and that's fantastic. It's a very, very unique and special.
With respect to that, I have a story I kind of just want to share with everybody really quickly. I was having a conversation with quite a high-end collector a couple of weeks ago, and he was very much a loyalist to one particular brand, and now he will never buy their products again, and he's a loyalist for another brand. And the reason that the first brand lost his loyalty was because, after years of his patronizing their products and working with them on, custom pieces and collecting very seriously, he went to visit them in Switzerland, and when he returned, the letter that he got from them said, "Dear valued customer." And that's all it takes.
I also think the big brands should learn from us to have a little bit of sense of humor and self-criticism. I think that would probably help. That was an easy one, sorry.
Yeah.
But we also manage companies as entrepreneurs. And for that, I did some experience in big groups and now in independent brand. And for sure, the way and the spirit of managing and taking decision, taking risk, has nothing to compare, nothing to do between being a manager inside a big group and being an entrepreneur, having your money, your shareholder, and the way you manage that, I do not really understand, but allows a project like HYT outside of a big group, taking very important risk, having a necessity to find and to fund fundraising, to find the money, etc. And when we compare the percentage of our R&D investment to the revenue that we do, and when I compare that to the other standards, it's like David and Goliath, but David are the groups in terms of size of this percentage. And this, I think it can be a danger for the whole ecosystem, especially for the big groups. But for us, it's a huge opportunity, because having this possibility, it's just a question of having the possibility to decide and to manage as an entrepreneur, as long as you have the shareholders with you. It allows projects like Global Forster, like Mother, like HYT, like many different brands. And this risk-taking, big groups are getting more and more risk-adverse. And
Right.
this gives us wonderful opportunities of creativity. But I think it could be done differently.
Unfortunately, the proportion is the inverse in marketing, so they can make you believe
compensate
anything
one
with
by the other.
That's what I was going to say. Actually, our R&D budget is what other companies would spend on marketing. And so we do very little marketing as such. We don't do advertising.
But that's
We
also
prefer
dangerous for
to-
us, because if nobody knows about it, then
Yeah, that's where
you need a
the
balance between marketing and R&D.
Yeah, between existing and not existing. Yeah, it's visibility and visibility.
Yeah.
It's a tricky equation to resolve. But again, as an entrepreneur, you've put your resource, the modest resource you have, fully in. It's your responsibility, but you have that vision, and that vision is that unquantifiable energy. That's the power that every morning when you get up, you know that you're going to move forward and you're going to push. And if you're in a big group, there are boundaries, and you can't really go beyond those boundaries because you don't have that decision-making power. So we can be more dynamic, we can be more creative, we can be faster moving in terms of decision-making process and more direct. But it has those advantages, and there are a bunch of inconveniences with that. So we just live with them and work with them.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Anyone? Yes.
Hello. Yeah. So you spoke about lots of different very interesting topics, and some of the terminology that was used really sparked something in me when you talk about an opportunity and creativity and all of these great things, which as an independent brand you do have, and is a big opportunity when you compare to the big boys. So my question is, I mean, I love the fact that we're doing this kind of event, but if we're honest, we're still talking to the same watch bubble, right? And I agree with you, like outside of this, I mean, 99.9% of people have never heard of the majority of the brands in this room. So if we've got all this opportunity and all these base ingredients which any human being can relate to, whether they've ever collected a watch or not, what are some of the things that you guys are thinking of to reach outside of the watch bubble, knowing that you're not going to spend a whole ton of cash on advertising, which is like white noise now anyway? So, I mean, this is great, but there's potentially people out there who would buy your product, but will never walk into a watch boutique and wouldn't think to come to a watch forum, but they are out there. So what are the things that you guys are thinking of for the future?
It's a great question.
I'll help you out. We're being streamed live, actually, so it's not just this room.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have to be careful what we say as well, because it's right out there. You know, it's not just, we can get you all to sign an NDA, but...
Oh, yeah, there are giant cameras back there.
Yeah, oh, I know. They've been beating down on us. It's true. I mean, for us, you know, we said we don't pay brand ambassadors, but actually, Global Forsey, we have brand ambassadors, but they are our collectors, and actually this is maybe one of our secrets for all of us, is that a collector who buys an independent watchmaker's watch, or has several, will wear it from time to time, and they are also, because once they captured the passion, they become a real ambassador for that. It's not just product placement, because they also believe in it. There's also elements they love at whatever level it is. It can be the design, it can be more the technical, it can be they took the time to come to La Chaux-de-Fonds, of all places that you would think of going. It's our center of our world, but not the center of everybody's world. But but once they've done that, and there's that unique experience, and this is what it is, you know, it's, we are human beings. We're thinking, we're creative, tactile, and emotional people, and so they actually do a fantastic job for us. Certainly, we know in talking about what we do, why it's special. You know, why would you buy a handmade watch for a six-figure sum to put on your wrist? You know, and so this unique experience is something which is developed and which is growing, I think.
Yeah, I agree. For us, the big investment is in those people. I mean, sending that letter without the valued customer, but the name on this first day with a small gift, unexpected, is probably the best way to get those relays. They are the people who will speak out to others about the brand. But in parallel, I think it's not only that for us at H. Moser, we try to think using new technology and going just step by step and being extremely focused, working with the retailer to drive customers into the stores, to ask to see a new product, to try to be, as I said, creative, talking about subjects that are maybe not only related to the watch industry, being IT, being business, being art. I think we have a lot to learn from Art Basel, for example, where you go to Art Basel and you have an experience. You see things that if you go in a standard boutique somewhere in a gallery, you won't see the same thing. Well, why do you go to Basel and just feel like you're entering a standard store whenever around the world? So I think, again, it's not going to be from one day to the other, but by being concentrated, the entire team pulling in the same direction, being open to new technology, being focused, you can do tons of things with geolocalization, with all those technology to touch a few more people who will maybe talk to somebody else. And again, try to bring a little bit of this passion, this emotion, this human dimension towards those people so they can communicate further and further and hopefully get a kind of viral effect. But everything takes time, obviously. If you don't have the money, it's... but we're all facing the same thing, I guess.
All right. So I want to thank everyone for having joined us today. I also want to thank you, gentlemen, obviously, for sharing your tremendous, tremendous experience with all of us. It's a privilege for me to sit up here with you guys, honestly. And I also want to thank Dubai Watch Week for making this forum possible. It's just such a valuable thing to, pretty much the only time we see each other, it tends to be at trade shows. And to get people together for an actual conversation about what we do and why we do it is terrific. So thank you. Wonderful.
Okay.